Our next guest, Laith Marouf. Man, I'm sorry for the wait. Thank you for joining me. How you doing this morning? Well, it's not morning for you, but how are you doing today?
Good, good. Thank you very much. It was good actually to hear some of Mark's comments before getting on the show.
Oh man, he knows his stuff. And Mark has been kind of our point person to explain this stuff going all the way back to the last several years. And his accuracy has been far better than many other people that you would ever find on mainstream media or something like that. So it's a fortune to have him. And I'm just as fortunate to have you. So and I thank you for it. I'm Laith Marouf. He is an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues in the liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented, underrepresented communities around the world. Laith, man, thank you for joining me today. I really
Great
appreciate
to be with you.
it. I was Donald Trump has been bringing people into his administration. And there's been two people that I like, Gabbard and RFK Jr. I appreciate their positions. The rest of the people seem to be lunatics to me. And he seems to be pushing an Israel first policy. And I always say people of policy, these are the people that he's putting in his positions. But the world is not the same world that he left. When Donald Trump initially was in office, he was going with the Abraham Accords. He effectively ignored the Palestinians. The Saudis were still out to get the Iranians. Like that was the world that he left. And so he had this pressure campaign against Iran during that time period. Okay, fast forward. Saudi Arabia and Iran has made amends. Israel has pissed off every actor in that region. I would go so far as to say even the world. And at this point, the main exporter for oil, or the place where the oil goes from Iran, is China, to the tune of something like 90%. So he is coming in with seemingly a pressure strategy in a world that is fundamentally different than the world that he left. From your point of view, what does this look like? If he comes in and he goes with his Israel first strategy, basically Netanyahu said he wants to cut the head off the state, meaning Iran, so he gets Trump to put pressure on Iran. What does that look like now that Saudi Arabia is probably not on board? The rest of the Middle Eastern countries, short of Jordan, may not be on board. China is not going to be okay with its oil revenue or its oil being cut. So that's off the table. And even if he wants to make some kind of agreement with Russia, if you are pissing off the other members of BRICS, I don't know how that deal with Russia is going to go all that well. It just seems like he's coming into a world with a philosophy that is 10 years old. What does that look like in practice from your point of view, meaning in a policy sense, and the way that the Middle East is going to react to Trump? What do you think the world looks like with Donald Trump coming into office?
Well, clearly he had the intention of ending the war in Ukraine somehow. And as we see with the Biden administration sabotaging that. But clearly his original plan was to end the war in Ukraine and to concentrate the war against the axis of resistance, seeing that originally out of the three competitors for US hegemony, China, Russia, and the axis of resistance, the US policymakers believe that the axis of resistance is the weakest of the three. And we saw that for 20 years prior to now, the US attempting to destroy basically any competition it has in Western Asia and North Africa, and they failed in that plan, and they had to rush in with the war of Ukraine because Russia and China were taking advantage of the US quagmire in the Arabic and Muslim world to develop as fast as possible. And in those 20, 30 years almost that the US started their war against the Arabic and Muslim peoples, China has become the number one industrial base in the world, and Russia has advanced militarily to be on par, if not more advanced than the West. So the plans of the US are not working out. But now, he had no choice in his mind but to go back to the original plan of defeating the axis of resistance, subjugating the Arabic and Muslim peoples before going into confrontation with Russia and China. And as we see, the Biden administration is not allowing him to stop the war in Ukraine by the decision that was made. Ultimately, what we have now as a cabinet that Trump proposed is not only Israel first, it's also Armageddonist. When you have, one of these ministers with a crusader tattoo cross on his heart, that means, yes, that means that they are really going back as far as the crusade idea. Anyways, what we've been living for the last 100 years in Palestine is a crusade, and sometimes you can call it a Jewsade. The idea of creating a Jewish supremacist state is similar to creating a Christian crusader state in Palestine. And this is why we are seeing this genocide being committed in Gaza and in Lebanon right now. These are exactly the things that the Crusaders did in 1,000 years ago. A millennia ago, the Crusaders walked into Syria, into Idlib, and had a cannibalist feast. They actually burnt the whole city and ate all the people in it. And when they entered Jerusalem, there was a bloodbath of rivers of blood. This is the Crusaders. And now we see the Crusaders, a millennia later doing the same thing. And of course, as in the Crusader states, the Crusader state cannot live longer than the Crusader states. The Crusader states lived like 100 years. Now we're reaching that 100 years since the Zionist project began with World War I. We're past that, so it's past its expiry date.
I guess my concern is that Trump is looking at this like, yes, I can isolate Iran again. And that's not the world we're in. I mean, the truth be told, I've always said that Joe Biden was the worst president we've ever had. Because on foreign policy sense, this notion of America, let's say dominance, it basically fell apart under Joe Biden. If you think of North Korea, if you think of Iran, those countries were isolated. Those countries are not isolated anymore at this point. Israel is definitely unsafe. Meaning, so from America's point of view and what America wanted to accomplish around the globe, it has not accomplished that. In fact, it has set the globe on fire. And if Trump goes in with this thought that he can somehow pressure Iran even to the point of war, that seems like utter chaos to me. I mean, Iran and Russia are signing a defense pact or some kind of defense agreement. It hasn't necessarily been outed yet, but it's clear that that's going to take place. China gets its oil from Iran to the tune of 90%. So if he goes in with this idea, for example, let me be specific. How do you think the Middle East, meaning Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, UAE, etc., are going to respond to Trump this time around as opposed to last time? Last time around, Donald Trump was very close with the Saudis. And that relationship with the Israelis, he went after Iran. Okay, well, is he still going to be close with the Saudis when he comes in this time around, especially if the Saudis is not on board with Donald Trump going after Iran? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we've been seeing in terms of the Saudis or the Emiratis and other Gulf countries, bringing down the heat in their confrontation with the Iranian government is just kind of theatrics. These Gulf countries are not real states. They have existed as vassals since their fabrication by the British. Yes. And, there is something like 60,000 American soldiers on the territory of the Saudi kingdom, surrounding specifically the oil fields. Similarly, the Emirates doesn't exist as a state. It's one out of 10 people inside the Emirate are actually citizens. So you have 90% of your population not citizens, foreign workers and so on, including your police force and so on. So this is not a real state. And that's true of Qatar and Bahrain and so on. which hosts the largest naval and air bases of the US in the world. So these states have been allowed, at least under Biden's regime, to play the usual, favorite, plots from the Democratic playbook, which is to play these intelligence, wars instead of direct wars. But when Trump comes in, you will see a huge change. Remember last time when Trump was there, he shook down all those Gulf states openly.
Right.
He whipped them on front of the cameras, called them cash cows, and they all bowed down, right? So there's not going to be a difference once he comes into power in terms of their ability to take any sovereign decisions. They are not sovereigns, they're vassals. Yeah.
Even Saudi Arabia, and the reason why I asked this for Saudi Arabia, when Joe Biden came in, they seemed to take a different tact, and they seemed to want it to, let's say, spread their wings a bit in looking at BRICS, and for that matter, still keeping the relationship with the United States. So they weren't completely obsequious in the way that they typically would have been. For example, when Joe Biden wanted the oil, they didn't just cut it by 1 million barrels, they cut it by 2 million barrels, almost to get across that they are not under Joe Biden's thumb, almost as somewhat of a resentment for some of the things that Joe Biden was saying. I guess my point is Saudi Arabia have seemed to try to diversify their allies, or at the very least diversify their business relationships and political relationships. You don't think that's going to matter, though, when Trump comes in?
Yes, because look, there is two wings to the empire. The liberal wing, that's like, the Democrats and something like Jordan, or and on the other hand, you have the conservative wing, and that's like the Republicans, Trump, Israel with Netanyahu, the Saudis, the Emiratis, and so forth. So they feel more aligned with Trump. And we saw this battle between these two wings at its height during the quote-unquote Arab Spring, which I would call the Arab Autumn. Obama had his liberal plan to bring in the quote-unquote Muslim Democrats, the Muslim Brotherhood, into power in all of the Arabic and Muslim world, and to anoint Qatar and Turkey as the rulers of this province. But what happened is that the Saudis and the Israelis revolted against Obama's plan, and instead had all those waves of Wahhabi death squads invading the areas that Obama was trying to hand over to the Muslim Brotherhood. So there is a constant civil war unannounced between the conservative and liberal wing of the empire, and the most obvious places that you can see this struggle, war between the two wings, is here on the ground, and or as we saw in the streets of Washington on January 6th, 4 years ago. So there, this battle will, when Trump comes into power, the Saudis will feel comfortable, and you'll see them taking a stronger position against Iran and Russia, and things are, for now, look like that they have calmed down, but they will come back to the front.
Wow. Okay, so you believe this is all just cosmetic at this point? I guess we'll see. I mean, I guess my feeling on this is the way BRICS has organized itself. It's organized itself in a way where it seems to be using peace as a weapon. And I mean that in the sense of, we're going to bring down hostilities because the empire, as you may call it, uses hostility as means to an end. So we're going to go after Taiwan in order to undercut China. We're going to go after Ukraine to undercut Russia. We're going to go after, use Israel to undercut the Middle East, and basically to create this kind of greater Israel. Whereas BRICS seems to be doing the opposite of that. We're going to bring down hostilities between Iran and Saudi Arabia. We're going to bring down hostilities between India and China. It just seems like a different operation that seems to be taking place among these two, let's say, forces within the context of the world. And it seems Saudi Arabia seems to be in the middle of that. Okay, fair enough. I'll go with that. Do you think Iran is going to go through with the attack that they kept saying they were going to go through with. Recent reports pointed out, and I don't necessarily take this as being true, this is coming out of Israel, that they destroyed a nuclear facility in Iran. Now, I don't believe that at all, but whatever. Even if I say that's true, do you think Iran is going to strike? I mean, they said they're going to do it, and they've been talking about it for the last several weeks, but up to this point, nothing has been done. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Iran will be responding. Obviously, all of us as analysts would have liked the response to come earlier, but we're not in the decision making, so I don't know what's the thoughts on inside those tight circles. Look, if Israel actually bombed a nuclear site in Iran, the whole West would have shown us all the satellite images, and they would have said that they have felt the earthquake, and showed us and they would have even tested the air going into other countries from east of Iran, and said there is this nuclear pollution or whatever. So no, it didn't happen. Most of the very important Iranian nuclear sites that could be used in a military way are under tens of meters, hundreds of meters of granite rock in the mountains. There's only a few exposed nuclear reactors, and they are for civilian electrical use. And the Israelis wouldn't dare attack those, because the Iranians would attack the exposed nuclear reactors in Israel, in the Zionist colony, one of them being just beside Tel Aviv. So although all of us are worried, and we should be worried about a nuclear holocaust, in my mind, I still think that this is not going to happen because of the deterrence that, if you blow up the 2 nuclear reactors in the Zionist colony, half of the population is dead. Okay. While if you blow up a few nuclear reactors in Iran that are far away from the main cities, even let's say if you hit the ones that are near Tehran, it's almost 100 million population, Iran. So killing a few million Iranians is not going to change the reality, while killing a few million Israelis will end the Zionist colony. Yeah.
Do you think Iran is going to switch? I mean, up to this point, it's been the Ayatollah that has prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And in a recent conversation, they pointed out that technically we can build this weapon. We choose not to do so. Do you think that with the pressure campaign that the U.S. is putting on, that they're going to look to North Korea in the way that North Korea is thinking, we have a weapon, so you can't attack us because we have this kind of weapon, that they're going to change their policy on development of nuclear weapons?
Well, there's 2 things that our viewers need to know. Number one is that North Korea's, or the Democratic Republic of Korea's nuclear and missile program were developed in coordination with Iran and Syria. Well, so that means that...
I know that.
Yes. So that means that everything that North Korea has, already both Syria and Iran have, at least if we don't have proof that they have the actual physical weapons and missiles, they actually have the knowledge. Secondly, I would say that there is a lot of indication and analysis from military analysts that are very close to the Iranian and Syrian government that for a long time have been saying that Iran and Syria actually have at least 1 nuclear head each, and that those nuclear heads were handed over by patriotic revolutionary generals and scientists at the collapse of the Soviet Union, from those weapons that were supposed to be taken away from Ukraine's. And this is the reason, actually, that Damascus was not directly occupied, because Syrian government threatened to use that 1 nuke they have. And this is the other reason why the West has been pressuring over the last decade Iran, because a nuclear head has a lifespan of around 30-35 years. And so you count from the collapse of the Soviet Union till now, those 2 nuclear heads that Iran and Syria have are coming to the end of their lifespan. And this is why the West is pressuring Iran, thinking that let's stop them from having the knowledge to create their own weapon before the expiry date on the warheads that are there happens. And one final thing I would say, to show you how much actually everything that Korea has, Syria has, and Iran has, is, the North Koreans were building a nuclear reactor in Syria in the end of the 2000s, outside Deir ez-Zor, and the US and Israel attacked it and blew it up. So that shows you how much actually, much of what we hear about this story is controlled information. All of these parties, including Iran, is playing along with the theatrics. The US is playing around with the theatrics that Iran doesn't have a weapon. Iran is playing that also, and it's convenient for everybody. But truthfully, no one can attack Iran with a nuclear weapon. No one can attack Syria with a nuclear weapon. If we do enter that phase, it means the end of humanity and nuclear winter for all the world. Even if you don't believe that Iran and Syria have nuclear weapons, once the US or Israel uses nuclear weapons against these countries, then Belarus will use nuclear weapons to defend Iran. President Lukashenko said that he would provide a nuclear umbrella to protect Iran. North Korea will use nuclear weapons. And this is not even bringing up Russia or China, who will also be most probably using nuclear weapons to defend themselves against the US. A use of any nuclear weapon against the axis of resistance will lead to a nuclear holocaust. So people should just not worry about it.
Wow. That is so disturbing on so many levels. I mean, in one case, I had, the conversation where Joe Biden is whistling past the graveyard of a third world war. And in this case, people may forget Israel is a nuclear power. And as you pointed out, whether or not Iran proper has a nuclear weapon, that they have an umbrella of other countries. I mean, for God's sake, Russia and Iran are coming up with some kind of security arrangement. We haven't seen it. We don't even know what it is yet. But I would imagine that, the existence of Iran will be part of the strategic axis of Russia. Basically, Russia's not necessarily going to allow Iran to go into that good night. So no, I accept that. I accept your take on this one, that any kind of attack on Iran with nuclear weapons is basically a full-blown nuclear war by other parties that get involved into it. Wow. I want to, before I let you, we have to close it, but before I let you go, what is taking place on the ground in Lebanon right now? From my understanding, Israel has been losing right many people, and they've been trying to get a lot of the ultra-Orthodox into the military, and they have not necessarily been doing all that well in getting that group into the military. Also, from my understanding, a lot of people either haven't been necessarily showing up or telling other people not to show up because of the difficulty of the service that they're engaged in, especially in Lebanon. What is taking place on the ground militarily in southern Lebanon?
Well, according to the Israeli, reports in the mainstream media of Israel, the Zionist military is missing around 20%, just over 20% of recruits.
Right.
So when they're calling in the reservists, 20% of them are not showing up. And now you couple that with the story that just came out a few days ago that Canada gave in the last year expedited citizenship to 10,000 Israelis, then you can extrapolate how much did the US give citizenship to, and how many did Germany and the UK and Australia and France. So we're talking about, probably 1 million Israelis that have been given citizenship already in the West. This is above and beyond the ones that already had dual citizenship. So, and then we can couple it with another story that just came out also a few days ago in Germany, that the German government has offered 40,000 refugees from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places in Africa expedited citizenship if they go and serve in the Israeli military. And that those 40,000 are already serving on the ground inside Gaza and on the border with Lebanon.
Yeah.
And then you add to it the story that if our viewers remember, at the beginning of the genocide in Gaza, Biden went down to the Zionist colony, and there was a picture of him with the Navy special, force, with the faces uncovered, and the American military and government got really pissed off that
I
picture
remember
was
that.
leaked.
I do
Okay.
remember that. Yeah.
So we know that actually all the special forces of the West, including the Canadian Task Force 2, German, French, Italian, whatever, are actually on the ground. So when we are being told by Israel, after we see an image of an Israeli tank being blown up in Gaza or Lebanon, that one Israeli soldier is dead, that means that at least 3 mercenaries that from all around the world that have been gathered and offered citizenship are also dead.
Also. Yeah.
All right. So we don't also know.
I see your point. I see your
Yeah.
point.
So we don't know how many also special forces are dying from the West. In general, the Israeli military is defeated completely. Yesterday, for 3 days in a row, they were trying to, make a huge land line into the third line villages on the coastline around Naqoura, the Israelis. After failing to capture any of the frontline villages, they tried to go around them and cut off, and they got clobbered. They had to retreat, and the Golani Brigade, the top most elite force within Israel, have just announced that they have had more losses on the front of Lebanon in those 47 days now, than their history combined since the creation of the Zionist colony. So they're not giving us numbers, but we already have clear indications that the Israeli military is defeated on the ground, that even all those hordes of mercenaries are not bringing any result. Even the special forces of all the West are not capable of delivering a victory for the Zionists, and that is why they're going on a rampage since yesterday, the Israelis, of bombarding civilian infrastructure and location. For instance, they bombed Beirut 18 times yesterday.
Yeah, I call it blackmail. I mean, I look at it as blackmail. It's like we want to take the South. We can't take it militarily, so we're just going to bomb and kill women and children until we get the government to agree to our terms. Laith, I'm going to have to let you go, man, but thank you for this. I really appreciate your explanation of this. Some of the stuff is just mind-blowing. I don't want to say terrifying, but, the stakes and what this country is involved in is disgusting, to put it mildly. We're backing a genocide. Laith, thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it. Laith Marouf,
thank you.
He is an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. You can follow Laith. Laith, what's your website, by the way? I have cacenter.org. Is that correct?
Well, that's my actual job as a media consultant, but the website for the is freepalestine.video if people want to watch the content that we're producing from the West Bank, Lebanon, and Jordan. We're bringing daily reports from the ground there in English.
Oh, very cool, man. I'm going to check that out, and I'm going to have to put that into your bio. Thank you for this, Laith. I really appreciate it. All right. I want to bring